This program will begin shortly. Welcome to the 2023 Aspen Ideas Climate Miami Beach. Please start to make your way to your seats in the Performance Hall. This program will begin shortly. Please welcome Peggy Clark, CEO and President of the International Center for Research on Women.
Good morning, everyone. How's everybody today? Great. Today is International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day. On this International Women's Day, I want to take a moment to recognize all the women activists, scholars, policymakers, students, philanthropists, investors, and others who are fighting to address climate change. If this describes you, please stand up. If you're a woman who's fighting for climate change, please stand up. Awesome. Beautiful. We are a multitude. And let's take a moment to applaud the women in your life who are working to create a better planet every day. I'm happy to report that 53% of the speakers here at Aspen Ideas Climate are women. Good job, team. We've been working on that for a while. Yet, women are often not front and center in climate discussions and conversations. We do recognize that women and vulnerable people are often disproportionately affected by climate change. In fact, 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. But women are not solely victims of climate change. They're a powerful solution to climate change, too. And today is a perfect day for us to recognize that. We have some remarkable women leaders who will be joining us today to inspire you and to give you hope. As centers of families and communities, women are really key decision makers about resource use, about the use of food, about the use of water, about the use of energy. Women are effective agents of change if only we invest in them. Yet, this will be surprising to you. Of all the billions of dollars going into climate finance, less than 0.2% of climate philanthropy goes to women-led action. Why is this? One reason is that policymakers and financiers say there is not data to demonstrate the evidence that there is a strong return on investment in investing in women-led climate action. So that's why at the International Center for Research on Women, we've started a project called What Works? Women in Climate, building an evidence base for women-led climate action. And what we are doing is assembling a portfolio of large-scale women-led climate action projects in the energy, agriculture, and water sectors to research both the environmental and the economic impacts of their work. And let me tell you a story about one of the projects, one of many. The Self-Employed Women's Association is in India, and amongst their millions of women members, there are 7,000 women who work in the salt industry in the north of India. Until recently, they used diesel to make their water pumps work, which extracts the salt. And the Self-Employed Women's Association worked with these women to transfer all of those water pumps, 7,000, into solar water pumps. Then the 7,000 women took one step further, and they purchased land to build a massive solar farm where they're selling energy to the grid. So this salt industry is seasonal and only provided income for 6 months of the year. But with the solar farm, they were able to have income throughout the year. So these were tremendous results, both in terms of reducing carbon and also increasing income and building resilience. And this is just one example. So we are identifying large-scale women-led climate projects from around the world, and if there are ones you are working on, we'd love to hear about them, to add to this portfolio so that we can produce data to present to financiers and policymakers about investing in women. Because unless we invest in women and center them in climate action efforts, we will not affect lasting change. We know this to be true. Transitioning to a green economy is not only about changing technologies, but it's also about changing our behaviors and our hearts and minds. And we know what it takes to change behaviors. It takes education, access, influence. In communities everywhere, women hold these powers. Women are key to behavioral change to move to a transition to a green economy. So I call on each of you today on International Women's Day and each day forward to look at what you're doing in climate change and try to think about more equitable and effective ways to include and invest in women in your efforts. They are one of the most powerful superpowers we have for addressing climate change, and today and every day we should commit to centering them in our work. Thank you very much.
And now, GM's Chief Sustainability Officer, Kristen Seaman.
Good morning. All right, there's nothing on the slides yet. There we go. Oops. All right, we'll get this right. All right, here we go. So thank you for having me here today. At GM, back in 2017, we set a vision of 0 crashes, 0 emissions, and 0 congestion. And I'm proud to be here today to tell you a little bit about our progress. Each and every one of us at General Motors is part of our acceleration to an all-electric future. This is our purpose. This is why we do what we do. We pioneer the innovations that move and connect people to what matters. It's a very simple yet powerful statement. Connects us to our past and the pioneering innovations that were done then, and connects us to our future. We changed the world once, and we're about to do it again. We know the impacts that climate change have had on communities, particularly what we've even seen in the past year. Things, ice storms and snowstorms in places that have never seen that type of impact. We have an opportunity now to make a difference and really change this for future generations to come. So at GM, back in 21, we set some pretty bold and ambitious goals. The first was to be carbon neutral in our products and operations by 2040. The second was to eliminate tailpipe emissions from our new US light-duty vehicles by 2035. These are based in science. We have science-based targets that are tracking our progress to both of these bold goals. So how are we doing? If you look at our progress and think about some of the announcements that have been made recently, it's pretty exciting. We've sourced all of the minerals, the critical battery minerals we need to make this transition and to produce the volume that we've committed. We're ready to go on that. We're transitioning our manufacturing facilities by investing over $35 billion to make this transition a reality in the next 5 years. We're working on products that cover every price point and segment so that everybody can be part of the transition. Things like infrastructure. We know we can't do that by ourselves, but we're going to be part of the solution. We're investing over $750 million in charging stations across the country, working with partners like Pilot and Flying J, our dealerships who know better than anybody what's needed in their communities from a charging standpoint. We're working with policymakers. We're excited about the energy tax credits and what that's going to do to accelerate this transition. In innovation, I talked about that at the beginning. Every day, the team at General Motors is working on innovations that are going to make this change happen faster and better for everyone. New divisions like BrightDrop, which are working on delivery vans and last mile delivery services. Our cruise technology, which today is providing autonomous rides out in California. So the innovation isn't stopping, it keeps happening every day. One of the things I'm really proud of is our team announced that we accomplished one of our goals 25 years ahead of schedule. We've now sourced 100% of the renewable energy to supply our facilities by 2025 in the US. So as one of our employees said, we skipped a generation in this accomplishment. And what you see on the right is another innovative technology that we're working with. Our GM Ventures team has invested in a company called Wind Catching Systems. That technology is designed to provide offshore wind capability that uses 80% less ocean real estate and provides significant more energy than today's offshore wind technologies. What else are we doing? Sustainability is really weaved within the entire company. Things like energy and water efficiency, working on renewable packaging. Every single area of our company is focused on what we can do to make this transition to a zero emissions future a reality. One of the things we've done is work with our suppliers. We instituted last year a supplier pledge that asks our suppliers to make their own commitments around carbon neutral goals, as well as commitments around how they do things socially, human rights, labor relations, fair labor practices. I'm proud to say that over 70% of our tier 1 suppliers have already signed on to this commitment. So we know we can't do this by ourselves. At GM, we talk a lot about everybody in. You'll notice the EV is highlighted. That's in us. We want to work with our partners, our suppliers, our customers, policymakers to really make this change happen as quickly as it can. One of the things we really pay attention to is how we do this. And so climate action, making it a very inclusive transition is important to us. That includes the future of work. Our current and future employees are part of this transition. Having EVs, vehicles that everybody can see themselves in, really focused on having affordable options as well. Things like Bill Nye drove, as he mentioned yesterday, the Chevy Bolt, all the way to pickup trucks and beyond. Infrastructure, we talked about everybody needs to be able to charge where they live and work, regardless of where that is at. And then we also started a climate fund to really support this transition. These are some of our incredible products that are coming. If you look at that, you see it's not one, it's many, and it's everyone in every type of lifestyle that you live. What has our climate fund done? So far, we've pledged over $50 million to help ensure that this transition is inclusive. We've invested with 39 different organizations so far. The impact is significant, and these are small community organizations that are really making a difference for this transition. So I'm going to play a quick video here of a collaborative that we started this year with the National Wildlife Federation, as well as a UN youth activist, A.Y. Young, who really has a passion for making the all-electric future a reality. We went on a tour with him, and I'll show just a little clip of that. Uh-oh, I don't hear any sound. Okay, well, we'll adapt. Hopefully you can see, A.Y. Young is a very passionate ambassador for us. He took the Chevy Bolt and went on a tour from Detroit to New York, interfacing with the youth, and the whole premise behind what A.Y. Young does is that he powers his concerts with a battery. And so using—
In my life, I've been storing energy from the sun through solar panels and powering concerts.
Let me see if I can— Sorry, we'll turn this. Here we go.
I know music is the most ideal way to spread any message, and it's the most ideal thing to move minds. What kind of music do you guys listen to? You guys like music? I'm A.Y. Young, founder of the Battery Tour and UN Sustainable Goals leader.
Can we power the whole concert?
The last 10, 12 years of my life, I've been storing energy from the sun through solar panels and powering concerts. I'm going on a sustainability road trip with General Motors, getting people plugged in. Bringing this message of climate equity to the people. I grew up in a neighborhood in Kansas City that was kind of rough. I watched my dad mobilize the community and bring my city together block by block. That inspires me to do what I do.
Welcome to the Paul W. Smith Show. Some folks working with General Motors to advance equitable climate action.
To really make change happen, it's going to take all of us working together. I've started something called Battery Tour. This is amazing. Can I ask you a question? What do you know about EVs?
I'm a factory worker, and there's no way I could afford one. I've been raised around diesels my whole life.
And I was just in this facility with the Ultium team that makes the cells for the batteries. And they're like, hey, we're scaling fast. So I think we're going to see it grow and become more affordable for everyone.
Yeah, I think electric cars would be greater.
Anything that's going to save some things on the planet.
I love what you're saying about possibilities. I think the possibilities are great.
There's plenty of classes and opportunities for students to learn about sustainability.
25% of Penn State's university-wide energy needs comes from solar.
So in the spirit of time, I'm going to stop it. We had a 30-second video, and somehow it looks like the longer one goes in, so I apologize. But I think the folks backstage will be happy if I stop you in the middle. So again, at GM, we're moving forward. We're setting the standards for the world. We're working together with everyone to make this transition to an all-electric future a reality. Thank you very much.
And now for an announcement. Greg Gershuni, Executive Director of the Aspen Institute Energy and Environment Program.
Hi, everyone. I'm Greg Gershuni, Executive Director of the Energy and Environment Program and co-director of Aspen Ideas Climate. It isn't news to anyone in this room that catastrophic wildfires are getting worse and have changed the landscape, destroying homes and threatening communities and livelihoods. The majority of Americans, 4 in 5, believe that we should be doing more to reduce the threat of wildfires and support increased investment in forest health. These fires have become more frequent and severe because of growing populations moving into previously forested lands, human suppression of good fires that are crucial to ecosystem health, and because climate change is making forests drier, hotter, and more susceptible to the fire. These trends are projected to only increase. By 2050, the area burned in the western US is expected to go up 2 to 6 times today's levels. We need a paradigm shift. So last year, the Aspen Institute partnered with the Nature Conservancy to help author a new chapter. We held listening sessions across the country, met with fire chiefs, landowners, mill operators, Native American tribes, and government officials to find the best way to improve community and forest resilience. And so today, we're releasing the result of that, our roadmap for wildfire resilience. We've created this roadmap to be a guide for policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels to launch better practices and greater protections for communities from the impacts of climate change. The ability of our nation to succeed in protecting people from wildfires and the health effects of smoke will depend on our ability to collectively embrace new strategies, change our thinking, and it will require trust and a willingness to invest in an all-inclusive approach to problem solving. You can check out the report at the QR code above. Now, it's my honor to introduce and turn this conversation over to the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and the Nature Conservancy Global Head of Policy, Darcy Vetter, to take the stage. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Darcy, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate TNC and the Aspen Institute for the incredible work that you all are doing in terms of our forests. And I want you to know that we at the Forest Service look forward to reading the report and learning from it, but that we've already begun to address this very significant issue. We recently established a series of priority landscapes across a number of western states where the risk of fire is and has been the greatest. There are many causes and reasons for this, and we're trying to address all of them holistically. We have addressed 21 priority landscapes in which we are investing almost $1 billion over the course of the next several years, utilizing a variety of technologies and techniques to try to begin the process of better managing those forests, to reduce the risk of wildfire. We're excited about the opportunity to really focus on firesheds that we have identified are at highest risk. We've identified within those 21 priority landscapes roughly 250 or so of these fire sheds, and we're beginning to address the 134 of them with this initial investment. And it's exciting. It's an opportunity for us not only to better manage these forests, but to reduce the risk to roughly 200 communities that are threatened by wildfire. It's also an opportunity for us to convert a lot of the wood that is going to be taken out to be able to protect old growth and mature trees and take out some of the underbrush and some of the hazardous fuel buildup and convert it into construction material. We're excited about the opportunity to see more and more high-rise buildings being constructed with cross-laminated timber, which can be taken from these forests as we do a better job. So I think we're going to find great consistency between what you and Aspen have basically suggested. It was a collaborative effort, and we're very, very excited about continuing to use the resources of the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act to be able to make an historic investment in our forests.
Well, it was, you've made a number of points that really highlight what the report found, right? Which is that there are opportunities for forest products to lean into that in a sustainable way. And certainly, you know, Greg noted for us in the introduction, we're in this together. So the health effects of wildfires, both the courageous firefighters who are facing more and more severe conditions, and then many of us in our communities who are breathing the smoke, the damages to infrastructure. We know that land after a forest fire is more likely to face landslides and fast water runoff, and so the effects of wildfires compound. So we all have a stake in this, not just those who live in the path of fires, and of course the fires themselves release significant greenhouse gases. But there are many mutual benefits if we do it right. And so that technology of how we use forest products, thinking about collaborating with the private sector around insurance and finance and developing that forest economy, and the multiple levels of government that have to participate. And I think one of the it was a real honor for us at the Nature Conservancy to be working with local, state, tribal, and federal government officials, including many of the talented people who work for you in the Forest Service, to come up with this approach. But equally important, and you mentioned this in your comments, as did Greg, are the people who live in those communities themselves and have to have a voice and a stake in the management of those forests. And so for me, as I look at the outcomes of this report, if we don't take the community approach, we probably won't get to a resilient outcome. And we can apply new technologies. We need to make sure we work on equity. We need to think about use prescribed fire and good fire and taking out some of that fuel, as you mentioned, that we can turn into products. But overall, that robust set of voices at the table is really the key to success. And so I do hope that many of you will take the time to it in full.
Well, when you mentioned community, part of what we were able to do with our effort was to do exactly what you all did, which is to reach out to the community first before we develop these priority landscapes, to ask for their input. We also have established a very close relationship with tribal entities that are basically very much interested in what happens in the forest. And frankly, when you do this collaborative effort, you not only have an opportunity for co-stewardship and co-management, which we're seeing more of with the tribes, but we also can learn. I mean, these folks understand and appreciate from indigenous knowledge. They know what needs to be done in the forest because they have lived there for literally centuries. And so the opportunity to learn and to incorporate that information into the way in which we manage the forest. You also mentioned the importance of our firefighters. As we take a look at this investment that we're making, we not only have to invest in better management of the forest, but we also have to invest in our firefighters. It should be shocking to everybody in this audience that at one point in time, we were paying firefighters $13 an hour to fight fires. In other words, they could make more money at a fast food restaurant than they could putting their life at risk every single day when they are fighting a fire. We also made many of these firefighters live in cars. I'm not exaggerating, this is the truth. There was not adequate housing. And so we are making an effort over the last several years to increase significantly the pay for these firefighters and to address not only the housing challenges that they have, but also mental health. It's a very stressful job, and we know that there can be consequences, especially if you lose a buddy in a fire, which often, unfortunately and tragically, happens. So as we invest in these forests, we also have to invest in people. We also have to make sure that we invest in the communities that are at risk. The reality is that it's not just the Forest Service, it's also those communities that can use resources to become more fire ready. And so we have a community defense resource that we're providing and will be providing as a result of the infrastructure law that's going to give local governments and local communities the resources to be able to do a better job of protecting their own communities. And so when you combine that effort with the national effort and what's happening with so many nonprofit organizations and state governments, you're going to see, I think, a very concerted effort there.
That's excellent. And I think partly speaks to the vast array of things that USDA does and can impact in rural communities, from housing and preparedness and infrastructure, as well as forests and farming. But I'm going to pick up on a theme you had here, which was really supporting people who are closest to the land. And you have been a real champion lately for those small farmers, and noting that they don't currently, in many cases, make enough income from the land or from their current farming operation to really feed their families. They rely on non-farm income, they have difficulty getting by, and a more comprehensive approach to the way that they run their operations and value-added opportunities is necessary. So I wondered if we could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure, happy to talk about that. Let me put a finer point on the point that you just made. The last 2 years have been the best 2 years in farm income in the history of the country. And I've often said to audiences, normally when a Secretary of Agriculture can say that, he or she can leave the stage to great applause and can be finished for the day. But here's the reality of that number. 50%, nearly 50% of farmers that sell maybe less than $350,000 in sales each year, those folks did not make any money. In fact, they lost money during those record years. Another 40% or so of our farmers made money. They probably sold less than $1 million in product, maybe more than $350,000. They made money, but the majority of money that they made for their family came from off-farm income. So essentially what you have is, in a record year, 90% of our farmers either didn't make money or didn't make the majority of the money that they have to support their families from the farm, which means that 10% did very, very, very well. And of that 10%, roughly 4% or so are investment bankers who own real estate and own, they're not getting their fingernails dirty, I can tell you that. They are reaping the benefit of large-scale commercial operations. So I think the question that people in this country need to ask themselves is whether or not we're satisfied with that system. Whether it's, in essence, you either get big or you get out. It seems to me that we ought to have a better way, and a better way is to create multiple revenue streams and sources of income from that farmstead, regardless of the size. And I think the climate conversation that we're now having in this country offers a tremendous opportunity to do just that. We established, as you well know, because TNC is very much involved in this, a series of 141 projects where we're investing over the course of the next 3 to 5 years roughly $3 billion. Those resources are going to help farmers embrace climate-smart practices in farms and ranches and forested areas. We're going to monitor, we're going to measure, we're going to quantify the environmental results of those practices. We'll learn what works and what doesn't work from those 141 projects. All 50 states are involved, every commodity group is involved, all sized operations are involved. And the reality is we expect and anticipate more than 60,000 farmers to participate, more than 25 million acres to be engaged in this. And we're linking those climate-smart practices with the commodities that will be raised to markets that would be willing to pay a premium for that commodity. So we have a value-added opportunity. Those farmers will also potentially be able to qualify for ecosystem service markets. There are roughly 24 of these markets out there today: water markets, carbon markets, biodiversity markets, et cetera. That's a revenue source that has not existed that now could exist for those small producers. Many of these projects involve conversion of agricultural waste and forest waste into something more valuable, a chemical, a material, a fabric, a fiber. Probably the best example is sustainable aviation fuel. As I often say to folks, I totally get electric cars, you know. When the battery wears out, you pull it to the side of the road, you get your cell phone out, get a charge, off you go. But what if you're in a plane and you're over a body of water and the battery wears out? Then what? The reality is we're going to need sustainable aviation fuel in the foreseeable future, and that can be bio-based. And that's a new revenue source, a new income source, a new job creator in rural places where you're converting something that has been a problem on many farms, an over-application, for example, in some cases, that impacts soil health and water quality, now becomes an ingredient in something, an emerging industry. So as we create these revenue sources, and I think agroforestry is one of those opportunities, which is the focus of the TNC-led effort. Tremendous set of partnerships between underserved producers, minority-serving institutions, large-scale corporations, big-time nonprofit organizations being led by TNC to essentially encourage agroforestry. And the benefits of this are multiple. We often don't reflect on the water conservation capacity of forests and trees. And if we maintain and manage our forests properly, it will help alleviate, to a certain extent, some of the challenges we have with scarcity of water or overabundance of water at certain points in time in parts of our country. So tremendous opportunity here to increase and to create not just two ways to make money at a farm where you sell a crop or sell livestock, but 5 or 6 or 7 profit centers. So if the commodity prices aren't great a particular year, maybe your ecosystem service credits are going well. If you can't get that corn sold, maybe you can get that corn stover basically sold to a processing facility down the road that's making sustainable aviation fuel. So the point of this is creating multiple ways for small and mid-sized producers. And this has a benefit, I think, also to rural communities because it helps to maintain population centers.
Absolutely, and the Climate Smart Commodity Program you referred to that the Nature Conservancy is leading, we are very excited by the fact that it does include underserved communities, that it's large and small operations, it's multiple regions, so you'll have different species of trees that we are asking farmers to incorporate into their production, which would have different value-added streams, if it's fruits or nuts or sustainable harvest of timber, a new income stream for those farmers. But that co-benefits that you describe, which those trees provide wildlife habitat, better water retention, wind breaks, protection from erosion, all of those should make their farming operations and the other crop production more resilient as well. So we're really interested in seeing that result. And the interesting part of this, of course, is that farmers who maybe grew row crops, who now are incorporating trees between fields or on the edge of their property, have to figure out where to take the products from those things. And so one of the things I find so interesting about climate smart commodities is that boost, that support, that community approach to then figuring out how many of those farmers have to adopt agroforestry before they can support a shelling plant for their pecans or their other nuts or the processing facility for their fruits, and how can we build a supply chain that works. And it will probably take some tinkering, right? So this public-private partnership, this investment to help make markets that truly support that diversification and value-added markets is great. And I think back to my experience growing up, and I look at this Climate Smart Commodities program and wish that we had it then. So I grew up on about a 280-acre organic farm in Nebraska in the 1970s, which is small for that part of the country, and there was just nobody else doing it. And so trying to find value-added opportunities to market our product, experimenting with different practices, we were sort of all alone trying to get it right, and to have these 141 different projects where everyone's trying to solve these same problems, and they're doing it in community. I mean, our neighbors thought we were nuts, right? And so, why are you trying to do this thing that kind of goes against the grain? To have a community of farmers and then the processors, universities, all supporting that effort at the same time, I think is really powerful, not just for the investment, but for changing the culture toward how people look at their farming operations.
You know, one of the great things about the TNC project is not only linking and helping to create that market, as you say, but also creating a certification system. A critical component to this effort is the notion that we're going to monitor, we're going to measure, we're going to verify, we're going to report the results. That's why we have nearly 100 universities involved in these partnerships, because we want to learn what works and what doesn't work, because that's going to be a very good guide. A guide to allowing us to invest wisely the historic amount of resource that was invested by Congress and the President in the Inflation Reduction Act, an historic amount of money that's going to go into conservation. The question is, how do you direct it? Where do you use it? So it's going to be important for us to know what works and what doesn't work, and to have that capacity to certify so that people understand when they buy something that they understand and appreciate this was purchased or produced in a certain way. It's also going to be, I think, important for us to help build out that supply chain. And so in addition to the Climate Smart effort, we're also making a concerted effort in building out that local and regional food system, the ability to get those nuts and berries into a market and processed and packaged appropriately. So we are going to invest in what are called regional food business centers. There will be 6 of them around the country. And these centers will be physical locations where where we will staff individuals who will be knowledgeable about the 50 programs at USDA that support regional and local food systems. They'll provide the technical assistance and the financial assistance for those who are interested in, okay, now I've got 6 farmers that are doing this. How do we aggregate? How do we create a food hub? How do we create a little processing? Where do we get the resources for value-added processing? Well, those are resources that the government can provide, to your point about the public-private partnership. And if we can build that local and regional system, then we can link those berries and nuts to a school where we're trying to improve nutrition in school meals. We can link it to a food bank so that folks who are struggling a little bit have access. We can link it to a local grocery store or a local restaurant or any institutional purchaser. So now all of a sudden, those small and mid-sized producers have alternative markets where they're not dependent on a global market price that can be impacted and affected by anything, anytime, anywhere, but they have the ability to negotiate their own. So this is the exciting, dynamic opportunity that we have in transforming the agricultural economy. And forestry plays an incredibly important role. We're doing the same thing with forest products, trying to figure out how do we link them directly to the market. And I think there's real opportunity here.
Absolutely, and I love the idea of farmers thinking about producing for the globe, for the region, and for their neighbors. Not only, I think, does it help spread that diversification, the community support and understanding of their operation, but it's a huge risk management tool that, if prices in one place are lower, prices in another might be higher, helps them spread that risk around. I'm really intrigued by some of the data that we're seeing too, that a more diversified and more climate resilient operation also tends to have less risk to yield, and that we're seeing new papers coming out that farmers who have adopted more regenerative practices make fewer and smaller crop insurance claims. And so to start to build that cadre of data that says actually climate resilience is good for your bottom line, I think in the Climate Smart Commodities program, the collecting that data, sharing that data will continue to sort of build out that body of evidence and make it a little bit easier for farmers to get, hopefully, financial assistance to make that transition, that initial investment, and turn some of these experiments into a longer-term business model. So I think that data connection, the diversity of markets, and the evidence we're building for that is really exciting.
Well, you're right. I mean, it can create a sort of a flipping experience where instead of spending a lot of money dealing with disaster, we have invested money that prevents the disaster. This is also true in forestry. The reality is we have, for far too long, one of the reasons we've not been able to manage our forest properly is because we took the money for management to put the fire out. And over time, more and more hazardous fuel buildup, larger and larger fires, more and more resources being sapped from the management side. The infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act allowed us to begin flipping the script here by being able to put sufficient resources into management, so hopefully over time we begin to see a reduction in the cost of firefighting, which in turn can allow us to direct more resources in improving recreational opportunities, because the recreational economy is incredibly important, especially out west. An opportunity for us to do an even better job of the amenities, an opportunity for us to do a better job of management. So it does flip the script, for sure. And I think, to the extent that it creates an opportunity on the farming side for small and mid-sized producers, it also encourages more people, young people, to get into the business. I think there's a deep concern of the aging nature of the farming population in the United States. Who's going to farm, right? And I think there are an awful lot of young people. There are veterans, there are beginning farmers, there are farmers of color who are interested and excited about getting into the industry. But boy, it's tough. It's hard. Where's the land? So we're looking at that. We're trying to figure out ways in which we can provide the resources and creating micro loan programs and micro farm crop insurance programs, all designed to help that smaller producer get a foothold, gain some equity, and then be able to, over time, become a mid-sized operation, and then with multiple revenue sources, basically be comfortable not feeling the pressure to become bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right, to get bigger, get out, right? Which has been a lot of the pressure that farmers have felt in many parts of the country. And I think, as you were speaking, I was thinking about my grandmother, right, who would always say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we've been in, that cure cycle, right, trying to fix the problem. And I haven't heard it put quite that way, that the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act and the investments that they're making, and really, I think, starting a conversation we haven't been having about investing in climate solutions and nature and communities as part of the prevention package, as sort of investments in resilience. We've really been talking about, I think, a green economy and climate and infrastructure in very new ways. And the way that you put that, I think, is particularly powerful, that preparedness.
This is an interesting point because, when you think about the climate conversation, it's always in the context of we haven't done what we needed to do, we're faced with a crisis, and we need to hurry up. But in a sense, it is also an opportunity to re-engage the country in a communal conversation, which I think we desperately need given the divisions within the country. We need to find ways in which we can find something common ground, and I think there is common ground when you talk about, well, let's spend money to prevent a problem that's going to cost us more money. That's something that can actually attract all sides to a conversation. And I think it's desperately needed. It also allows the United States to take not just an opportunity domestically, but also internationally. The reality is that as we've done climate smart agriculture and as we've invested these resources, we're getting attention from other parts of the world. They are very interested in asking, well, what are you doing over there? And in the past, it's always been a bit of, as you well know from your prior experience in the trade world, there's always been a bit of skepticism about the U.S. And in terms of the size and the commercialization of our agriculture. But now it's what are you doing? How is it working? How would it work? Because I think they're beginning to see maybe this public-private partnership, maybe the government reducing the risk, reducing the cost of conversion to more regenerative practices. Maybe that's the way to get more and more farmers as opposed to basically forcing a particular way to do. I mean, I don't think our farmers don't react particularly well to being forced to do something, but if you incent them and you show that there's a profit opportunity, they're more than happy to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and you're right that farmers everywhere are facing some of those same challenges. And I think you're also right that in terms of that investment, it's sometimes more attractive to be investing in your neighbor than to a government far away. So I think both of those things provide interesting pathways for the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for sharing the time with me today.
You bet. Thank
you. Please welcome CEO of Constellation Energy, Joe Dominguez, with Amy Harder of Cypher.
Good morning, everyone. It is so lovely to be here. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with Joe up on stage. But as we get settled, I have a question for all of you out in the audience joining us here live in Miami. Raise your hand if you think nuclear power is an important climate solution. Okay, I think there's about 2/3 of you. Raise your hand if you don't think it should be part of the solution, or if you're just not sure. Okay, a few more hands up. Good, I'm glad we're all being honest and feel comfortable sharing. I want to ask that question to lay the groundwork for our conversation. We have with us Joe Dominguez, who leads the company with the largest number of nuclear power plants in the United States. I think if I had polled that question even 5 years ago, a lot fewer hands would have gone up. Joe, can you tell us about why there has been a sea change in support for nuclear power in recent years?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, good morning, everyone. It's exciting to be here today. Could I just diverge for a moment? I got to meet Amy a little bit backstage. She grew up in a ranching family and happens to never have seen Yellowstone, which I thought was fairly remarkable. But I wanted to share that story.
Now that you've called me out, I'm going to have to watch it. And also, as an addendum, I completely agree with the secretary and the other conversation about how farmers do not want to hear from the government. I can confirm that as well.
I think that resonated. I think the big sea change, well, certainly the events that we've seen in Europe most recently have really reinforced the importance of having a domestic energy security element. And I think nuclear does that very well. It also does it on a more granular level in terms of the reliability of the system. We have had, over the last 5 or 6 years, some unfortunate events from a reliability standpoint. Look, we're in the anything, anywhere, anytime business. Anything you want to power, anywhere on the grid you want to put it, and anytime you want to run it, whether it's a hairdryer, an electric vehicle, or a steel factory, we have to power it on the grid. And that presents some real challenges as we do this transition. We have to have resources that are both resilient and very predictable in their operation. And the deeper we get into addressing the climate crisis and changing over the electric grid, the more important it becomes for us to have resources that operate when we need them to operate. And in the case of renewables, we obviously have to deal with the intermittency. So as intermittency becomes a bigger issue as renewables penetrate more, we need to have baseload resources that operate all the time, that are carbon free. And I think, Amy, that's probably changed the discussion as we've seen a near crisis in California, a real crisis in Texas, and most recently, folks didn't hear about it outside the electric industry because frankly, the crisis didn't occur, but just before Christmas, in the largest part of the US grid, spanning from Illinois all the way to the mid-Atlantic states, we almost once again had a catastrophic failure of the electric system. And we realize that reliability has to be the first order of business as we execute this transition. As much as we all care passionately, and I went to become an engineer early in my career, really focused on environmental engineering and things of that nature. But the reality is last year also told us that if affordability and reliability isn't there, the general public will restart coal plants rather than face an economic or a reliability crisis. And that's a challenge for what we're doing. Nuclear solves that by providing a very predictable chunk of the electric supply, accounting for more than 50% of our zero-emission clean energy today.
So you're looking to extend the licenses of most of your nuclear power plants to have them run to 80 years. Now there's a healthy debate happening in this country on if 80 years is too old to be president or to run again as president. Is it too old to run a nuclear power plant?
Well, unlike people, we could change the major components and have in nuclear power plants.
Just give us a few years.
Sometimes, Amy, I'd love to see a bit of a brain transplant for some of these folks, but I certainly know what you're talking about. But Amy and I were talking, one of the things that we're doing at the company is repowering our windmills. We have a large fleet of renewables as well as nuclear. And she was saying, what does repower of a windmill really mean? And I said, well, you take the blades off, you take that big chunk at the top, the generator off, and basically you take it down to a concrete pad and maybe the stand and replace all the parts. And she said, well, that doesn't sound like repowering. That sounds like all out replacing it. Well, in many respects, it's what we do with nuclear plants and have done since they were built. We consistently replace major components, and we spend over $1 billion a year doing just that, so that we could ensure that the pumps and the major equipment are as good or better condition than when the plant was brand new. And usually it's better, because usually the equipment that we're able to install in the plant has also benefited from technology and materials and controls. So I would say the units today are in better shape than the day they were commissioned. So yeah, we could go a lot longer.
I want to turn to a topic that's getting a lot of attention in the energy industry, which is of course adjacent to climate, but they're not always the same thing. So another question for the audience, raise your hand if hydrogen is something that you think about or care about or are interested in. Okay, a lot of hands. That's a good setup for something that's happening as we speak, or in the last few weeks in New York. You guys are launching what is considered the US's first nuclear-powered hydrogen facility, which I guess in the rainbow of hydrogen colors is considered a red or a pink. Can you talk about why this is important and what it could do that for perhaps green hydrogen from wind and solar could not do?
Well, I think at the end of the day, what we really need to focus on is whether or not we emitted carbon in producing the hydrogen, and probably dispense with the color coding here. But the reality is what we're able to do with hydrogen production in New York, and we just got through commissioning and we got into actual operations. So first time we've connected the hydrogen making equipment with a nuclear plant electrically. If just based on, I saw a number of hands go up around nuclear plants, pro or against, but you probably all know kind of the design. We're on water generally, so there's water availability to make hydrogen, which is just an electrical process to separate the oxygen and the hydrogen in a water molecule. And we have transport capability. Again, we're usually on big water, so whatever product we make with that hydrogen, we could quickly move. And we have an abundance of the energy I talked about earlier, energy that is always on. And as it turns out, that works very well for hydrogen production, because you want to have a consistent source of clean electricity in order to make that hydrogen. And so the IRA actually was the catalyst for going commercial with this. But it really has a legacy and work that the Department of Energy has been doing for a few years. And Constellation was lucky enough to earn a grant to not only produce the hydrogen, but also once it's produced and stored, we also received another research grant to then take that hydrogen that's been produced and turn it back into electricity through a fuel cell, which is super cool, because what it does is starts to address this intermittency issue that we talked about earlier. We know we have energy on the grid that right now is going away, coal and ultimately natural gas. It's very predictable, and we're going to be left with some baseload resources, but mostly resources that operate intermittently. So it's going to be important to figure out a chemical storage mechanism apart from a battery. A battery might give you 2 or 4 hours of coverage. But imagine a future world where you make hydrogen, where demand on the grid is low, you store it in an underground cavern, and then you consume it again through a fuel cell when you need that electricity. And that way you could handle seasonality, not just the day and night issues that we deal with solar penetration, but the fact that we see wind output drop considerably in the summer months in the Midwest, but is exceptional in what we call the shoulder months, the spring and the fall. Make hydrogen then, store it, and then reuse it at times when our customers need a lot of power in the summer. It's really a pretty cool solution.
One of the persistent concerns of nuclear power is that it's pretty expensive. Does having hydrogen as an additional output help justify the costs of nuclear power?
Actually, Amy, I hate to argue with the premise of the question, but but
go right ahead.
But
go right ahead.
will. What historically has led to this discussion about nuclear power being relatively expensive is net of all the federal and state subsidies that have existed for other sources of energy, whether they be renewables or even fossil fuels, nuclear not receiving a subsidy was perceived as expensive. Now that's been addressed by the IRA and the tax credits contained. With the tax credits, not only is nuclear not expensive, but I would argue is the lowest cost form of clean energy that it could be consistently produced. So hydrogen will give us another use case and another opportunity to use that affordable, reliable, clean energy, but it isn't the thing that's going to change the dynamic. What changed the dynamic is when Congress passed the IRA, quite honestly, enormous.
We have heard a lot about the IRA, and for good reason, but we've also heard that if we don't do something about permitting and approving of all of these projects, that we will not see the fruits of the labor of IRA. So can you talk about, from your perspective, both as a nuclear generator, but also wind and solar, how can we get things built in a way that's respectful of communities and environmental reviews, but is also fast as we need it to address climate change?
Well, I think this fight over community issues is very real. And I think it's forcing everyone in the energy business, whether you're building a generation resource or a transmission resource, to go to the well. In many respects, it's one of the challenges that we're going to have to confront. In the early days of renewable penetration, it was kind of an attractive thing. People wanted to put it on mountaintops, and they did. And across farmlands, and they did. More recently, and I think this has become a bit of a political football between the parties, there is now a significant pushback, especially in many conservative areas where permitting used to be easy for us and now is a real challenge. I think ultimately we kind of got to get real here. And this is going to be a difficult conversation. This stuff takes up space. This stuff will disrupt kind of the visual landscape. And we need to minimize that. But at the same time, I think what this question really boils down to is a disagreement today in this country that is more acute than it was 10 years ago. Ironically, you talked about the evolution of thought with regard to nuclear. But there's been a negative evolution of thought with regard to climate. And I just think we're going to, painfully get through that. But I don't have a magic bullet here.
In our final moments together, I want to do what I call concluding lightning round, where I ask you to answer with the first word that pops into your head with the following words. First one is natural gas.
Yellowstone. No. Natural gas will be around longer than we want it to be.
What is your favorite
That's
TV
not one word, right? Okay.
Just one word.
Okay.
Maybe bridge.
Bridge.
The audience does not agree with that.
Yeah. That seemed to get the thumbs
What's your
down.
favorite TV show? I'm guessing it's Yellowstone.
It actually is not. It's 1923. A derivative.
Sounds like we have some fellow fans. I've never even heard of that, so clearly I need to go watch some TV. Next word, rooftop solar.
Great.
Did you say great?
Great.
Nice. Advanced nuclear power.
Questions?
I'm going to let you elaborate on that with one or two more sentences.
I think we're not going to get it done with the technologies that presently exist. So let me say it very bluntly. Renewables, battery storage, even hydrogen, coupled with saving existing hydro and nuclear, that's not going to allow us to transition, and especially not be able to grow grid consumption, to electrify industrial processes, transportation, and those sorts of things. we're going to need a new technology here. It could be advanced nuclear. It could be something that we haven't thought of before. And it could be consuming a fossil fuel with real sequestration. And by that I mean really sequestering all the CO2. All of those things have challenges. I think the nuclear industry in particular is faced with a real strong competitor in the fossil fuel industry, and I already get that this may not be what you want to hear. But these gigantic fossil fuel companies that earned enormous profits this year invested about $80 billion in capital. Now, we're the largest producer of clean carbon-free energy in the country, and over the course of the next 5 years, we'll be able to deploy somewhere between $5 and $7 billion of capital. So these companies have enormous resources, and they're working very hard to figure out how to make their products work. I know you see the commercials and all of that, and I don't want to get in a fight with big oil. They already know where I live. But
maybe next year we can have a big fight up on
But the truth is, they're going to invest heavily, and I think they may develop some emerging technologies that ultimately will compete with everything else, including advanced nuclear. So more to follow.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Now, an announcement from Gerilyn Lopez.
Buju Wabishke Benasis and Dishnakas Mikanak no Dame Gawaba Biganakag Na. Hello, my name is Gerilyn Lopez. My friends call me Jerry. I'm a member of the Whiter tribe located in central Minnesota. I'm proud of the steps my community has taken to address climate change and equip our people with renewable energy sources. When I was in my early 20s, my tribe was actively working towards advanced technologies like solar and wind power. I was interested in construction and was fortunate to play a part in learning how to bring these technologies to my community. Unfortunately, as it is too often the case, the funding dried up, and I found myself searching for new opportunities, an opportunity to continue and to learn my skills. Around the same time, my mother-in-law told me about an opportunity she came across for young people to assist low-income families in Minnesota to achieve greater financial stabilities by lowering their energy usage. The program, AMPAC Home Energy Initiative, was an AmeriCorps service year program where I could get paid, learn new marketable job skills related to the green economy, and make a positive impact on families and communities that I would be serving. I jumped at the opportunity. During my service year, I served at Community Action Agency, where I was paired with an experienced energy efficiency professional. I learned the on-the-job skills that are needed to assist low-income families in making their homes safer and more energy efficient. I learned to test and analyze building envelope and began to understand the ins and outs of weatherization. Just as importantly, I learned how to problem solve and communicate with people across Minnesota, all while providing client education to families in my state. During my very first home visit of my service year, I was assisting an older woman with her home energy usage. I remember her telling me she was so impressed to see other women succeeding in what she had traditionally thought of as a man's profession. Until then, I hadn't realized my service here was doing more than just helping my career. It was serving as an inspiration for other women like me who were interested in a career in the energy sector. The skills, training, and experience I received during my service here got my foot in the door in this industry. It equipped me with skills I needed to secure my current position as a weatherization auditor at Mojave Ottawa Community Action Partnership. And today, I'm in a career that I know is not only making a difference for the environment, but also for the families I assist day in and day out. I hope my story can be an example for other young women and for all of you. Weatherization and energy jobs are no longer just for men. If we invest in our training, our next generation, we can empower women and men from all walks of life to join this climate fight and to pave new pathways to opportunities for all of us. Miigwech.
And now, Her Highness Shakina Shama bint Sultan bin Khalifa Al Nahyan and Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava with Peggy Clark.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. This is the panel with the princess and the mayor. So hold on to your hats because we have two really, really remarkable women here, one from a leading Middle Eastern country and the other from one of the largest counties in the United States, who are truly on the front lines of innovation. So let's begin. I think you both have a lot of fans in the audience, which is a wonderful thing. So you are both right in the middle of supporting huge innovations in addressing climate change. So can I start with you, Your Highness? Tell us a little bit about the innovations you're working on right now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here at this important conference that's focused on a topic that I'm very passionate about, climate action. In September, I launched and accelerated an independent NGO that's working to accelerate climate action by growing the green economy. And through this accelerated, our aim is to build a repertoire of investable projects that we hope will drive the green economy forward. We've come across a number of interesting startups and innovations, many of them from the United States, that we're hoping to bring to the UAE and pilot them there. I'm very hopeful and very excited. We often hear a lot of the doom and gloom stories of climate change, but when I see and meet passionate people that are creating solutions, it makes me extremely hopeful.
Thank you so much. And this UAE Independent Climate Accelerator, it is not just for entrepreneurs in the UAE, it's for entrepreneurs all over the world, is that right?
Absolutely. Climate change is a borderless challenge, and my view is that we all need to be working together to drive positive impact in this world. And some solutions here can be taken elsewhere around the world, and vice versa.
Thank you, thank you. Mayor Daniela, tell us a little bit about the exciting innovations that you're working on right now.
Well, first of all, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for hosting Peggy as moderator and Her Highness. We've had a wonderful conversation and we've already found great ways to partner. So very excited about the innovations that she is bringing, not just to her country, but to the world. Well, right here, we all know that our environment is our economy. And certainly as mayor, we've doubled down on the great work of our Office of Resilience and other departments working together. And some of the big initiatives have to do with protecting our bay, which is our blue heart, and is often in peril from unfortunately, pollution and different inputs, and we're working hard to protect our bay with the first ever Chief Bay Officer. Also, we're working on the Everglades, which we have 2 national parks here in this county, which is unique and special. And Everglades National Park and the Everglades broadly are our lifeline. That's our drinking water source. And we have to do everything possible to make sure that we don't encroach upon that and we keep our water clean and safe for all of our community. And we're also working in a way to bring solutions through the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority, which was approved yesterday at the Board of County Commissioners. We're very excited. It's to bring new ideas, new enterprises that help us solve some of these really serious problems. And an example of how we're going to partner with the accelerator. So we know that there are solutions. We have big challenges, and with that will come big solutions, and we are already very aggressively pursuing many.
So let's talk a little bit about, it's so interesting that you're working on the Innovation Authority and you're working on the accelerator, and you both talk about supporting entrepreneurs and technology and startups, but you also talk about growth. And so often, small startups will not get to a scale that makes a difference. But I realize that both in Miami and the UAE, you're confronting really, in many ways, some of the most drastic effects of climate change. So what are your plans to help those businesses grow, and how will funding actually happen? And let me begin with you, Mayor.
Well, thank you. So yesterday it was approved. We have now $9 million in our fund. That's from a combination of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation and Ken Griffin and the Citadel Company, along with the county. And so we're going to look for innovative solutions to climate, to sea level rise, to housing challenges, traffic, you name it, with $100,000 seed grants through this new nonprofit Miami-Dade Innovation Authority that was inspired by a trip to Israel and learning about the Innovation Authority there. So we're going to be finding those who can benefit from a $100,000 seed grant. They'll be able to test, pilot their solutions, and if successful, the county can go ahead and procure those services, helping the company to scale, and there'll be other venture capital supports to help those businesses as well. So we're really innovating in a space that immediately will address our problems. So it's sort of turning the innovation on its head, with really the county and other public entities saying, here are challenges, help us solve them.
Right, wonderful. Just a little more on your interesting innovation effort. How will it work? And do you want to give us an example of an entrepreneur, or a little bit more detail? I know it's just started, you just announced it. How will your accelerator work?
So we've created a framework, a proprietary framework, whereby we put technologies and startups through that framework to ensure that it has a positive environmental impact, social impact, and economic impact. We believe in growing the green GDP and growing the green economy, and so it must have economic impact as well. We've been in discussion with many organizations. One of them, for example, is a HVAC system, which is 30% more energy efficient and creates water. Miami is a humid place, but the UAE is a lot more humid, and so there is so much potential in capturing the water that's in our air and the humidity in our air and creating water out of it.
That's a beautiful example. That's great. It's so interesting to me that you both are really on the front lines of innovation from two very different places. And I can't help but think, with the Princess and the Mayor, what extraordinary lives you both have had that have led you to this moment. And I know you started as a community activist and really fighting in the trenches for low-income people. You have been fighting for gender equality for most of your life. Can you tell me a little bit, Mayor Daniela, about your own personal story and what you brought you to this moment where you have all these fans in the audience and supporting your authority?
It is Women's History Month, and it's International Women's Day.
Yes.
I am extremely proud to be the first woman mayor of Miami-Dade County, and I hope that this does make sure that little girls and bigger girls everywhere know that there are paths to achieve whatever they dream is possible. And my own personal journey is one where I was always supported by my family and friends to achieve my dreams. I had a great education. I got to travel the world. So I had many, many advantages, including training in law and social work, both I think very critical to success in making change. And yes, I was in the trenches as an organizer, certainly around children and families primarily. My environmental chops come mostly from my life, which is to say all of my free time spent in nature as a child and now as an adult and our children as well. So I call myself a born-again environmentalist. It was not, it was not my first path, but coming into this office as mayor, and a key factor for why I came into it was because I knew that I needed to be on the front lines, protecting, preparing, building momentum and support for the important work that lies ahead.
Beautiful, thank you. Her Highness, will you tell us a little bit about your own life and your personal story and what brought you to this moment?
Just like Mayor Danielle, I've always been passionate about nature and the environment. I try as much as possible to spend times in the great outdoors. I'm an avowed thalassophile, and that's why it's important for me to be by the ocean, and that's one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be here in Miami, by the sea. I come from a lineage of leaders who cared deeply about the environment and people. And my nation is 52 years old, but we managed to leapfrog many nations. And my ancestors really cared deeply about the land, cared deeply about wildlife. I was recently at the National Archives, and to see the impact that they had had globally was impressive. They had brought back animals from the brink of extinction, the Arabian oryx. They've supported conservation efforts globally, like the Bengal tiger. And these things have influenced me as a person, wanting to continue to lead and to do what's right for the people, for the planet. My region, my country, is the first nation within the GCC region to sign up to the Net Zero by 2050 pledge, which makes me very proud.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Those are beautiful stories, and I understand you both sit on the boards of nature preservation work, which is wonderful. You said something to me the other day, Your Highness, about, we mentioned a commitment by 2030 net zero, but you said something about the prognosis for the UAE that was quite dire, and I think there's probably a similar projection or prognosis for Miami. What was it you said? You said?
I said that our temperatures in the region, in the Middle Eastern region, are rising 2 times faster than the global average. So we're really at the forefront of climate change and feeling the effects of it. A study by MIT suggests that by 2100, my region will be uninhabitable. And there are serious health repercussions as well, and effects to our crop production.
Yeah, exactly.
If I could, yes, add on that, we have the most days of extreme heat of anywhere in the country. So while the temperature on its own is not the most sustained, when you add the other factors, the humidity and so on, and this is extremely dangerous as well. Obviously, so many outdoor workers, just the sustainability of the climate.
Yeah, and how are you addressing that issue of heat?
We have the world's first chief heat officer, Jane Gilbert. Wow. Yes. And clearly she's had a global impact, and through our Strzok Foundation around the globe, there are others now. 2 years ago when we started, people laughed at us, but no more, because we all see the extreme weather and particularly heat. Now we have a heat season. We have a major educational campaign around how to avoid the impacts of heat, and we have cooling centers, major initiatives around cool roofs, and other things that we're doing.
That's wonderful. So, you know, really quite literally, you both hold the future of Miami-Dade County and the UAE in your hands in the roles that you're playing. And that's why you're in those roles, because we believe in you. Are you hopeful? Can you tell me, are you hopeful about the prognosis for the future?
I'm very hopeful, based on the conversations that I'm having with young people, women, startups, innovators. What we forget is what drives innovation is sustainability and the challenges that we're facing. The fact that over the last few years, I've seen more and more people take action within their organizations, within their communities. I'm hopeful that there's going to be an acceleration towards climate action, and the UICC is working on that day in, day out.
Beautiful, thank you. Mayor Daniela, what are your thoughts? Are you hopeful?
Yes, I'm cautiously hopeful and optimistic. I am by nature an optimistic person, and I see the involvement of young people, of more women in leadership roles, greater focus at the local level, local government, local enterprises, and getting attention on the world stage, that we are doing real things in our local communities and galvanizing support. I think that's the key, and it's really on all of us. So I think that the early adopters were here, but now the speed of adoption, of understanding, and the necessity to take action is accelerating rapidly. And things like insurance, I just want to go back for a second. We are working really hard in our county to be more insurable, to put in place the kinds of protections and mitigation strategies that will make us more insurable and make sure that we can protect our people and our assets for as long as possible.
No, that's wonderful. And right here at Aspen Ideas Climate, these two formed a partnership with both the Accelerator and the Impact Authority are partnering together. And so I'd love to invite you to keep us updated on the enterprises and technologies you're investing in with Aspen Ideas Climate audience, which is far beyond this audience. But I do want to say on International Women's Day, it really takes my breath away that we're led by two exceptional women such as yourself. And I want to invite us to give you a round of applause and courage to keep going.
For an announcement, please welcome Andrea Santee from X Prize.
Thank you. It was fantastic to hear about the innovative programs that the mayor and the princess shared. And I'm honored and excited to be able to announce the newest X Prize competition. At X Prize, we are dedicated to inspiring and incentivizing breakthroughs that address the most critical challenges facing humanity. Globally, the severity of wildfires is increasing, Extreme wildfires spread faster and burn larger areas at higher intensities. And while only around 3% of wildfires are extreme, they drive 80% of fire-related damages and account for a growing percentage of global greenhouse gas emissions. Imagine a world where wildfires are rapidly detected and allow the management of safe fires and the swift suppression of high-risk fires. Next month, team registration opens for the $11 million X Prize Wildfire, a 4-year competition that includes 2 tracks: autonomous wildfire response and space-based detection and intelligence. Together, these tracks seek to synergistically innovate firefighting technologies and end destructive wildfires. We thank our co-title sponsors, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and Pacific Electric and Gas, and our presenting sponsor, Mindaru Foundation. I want to thank Aspen Institute for hosting this amazing event, providing us this space to be able to share our announcement, and joining us as an official partner of X Prize Wildfire. We invite all of you to help share the information, follow us on the web, spread the word, recruit teams, partner with us, and help scale winning solutions. I'm here through the rest of the conference, and I hope to meet a lot of you. And please enjoy as the video shares more. Thank you.
Le symbole de la désolation.
A múlt heti bozott tüzek utáni. Repszívek a pendespitia.
Now, John King with Dan Porterfield.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Porterfield with the Aspen Institute, and so pleased to be here with my good friend John King, the Chancellor of the SUNY system. But John King has held every role you can hold almost now in supporting public education. He was the CEO of the Ed Trust. He was the Secretary of Education in the Obama administration. He was the State Commissioner of Education in New York. I'm working backwards. He was a middle school principal and a high school teacher. So he's done it all. And we have a blast together. And so when I got the assignment that I could interview you, I ran home and told my wife, Karen, I got the best job in this whole summit. So, big question. Everybody thinks about the climate issues and the energy issues through the lens, of course, of the economy, of the earth, all different aspects of how we live, how we purchase, healthcare. But what about education? Why should educators, educational leaders, be engaging in the questions that we're discussing at this summit?
Well, thank you for asking that, and Dan, I so appreciate Aspen putting an event like this together and focusing the country's attention on these issues. So, you know, I'd start with the young people. We have 50 million kids in our K-12 schools. We've got 20 million students in our higher ed institutions, and their lives will be profoundly impacted by climate change. And so we owe it to them to make sure that they're equipped with the skills and knowledge to navigate that world. I have a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old, Amina and Maria, and when we're talking about climate, they often will say, you know, you older people, you say it's on us to solve the problem. It's really on you all to solve the problem. You created this problem. Don't just leave it to us. And so we have to use the tools that are available to us. And in education, you know, think about K-12, 100,000 school buildings, 480,000 school buses, 7 billion meals per year. So there's tremendous opportunity to leverage the assets of the education sector to tackle climate change.
And you took part in a big Aspen project along with Christine Todd Whitman, the former EPA commissioner and Republican governor of New Jersey. And this commission was put together by the Institute to look at the K-12 sector and to bring together all kinds of leaders, thinkers, students, educators to ask the questions, what can we do? In fact, Laura Shifter is here somewhere, and she was the one that envisioned this. That's Laura right there. Thank you, Laura. She woke up at home one day and said, I got to do more, and then it was her, this is what she brought to the Aspen Institute. Well, you were the co-chair of that, so what did you take away from that experience of listening and then recommending?
Yeah, you know, it was a great experience, and it was great to co-chair it with Governor Whitman because I thought it sent a powerful signal to have a Republican and Democratic former cabinet members both leading this effort. We had civil rights leaders, educators, environmental activists, and student leaders who were phenomenal. We spent a year listening and, you know, share a couple of examples of things we heard. One really scary and maybe two hopeful. So the scary one was a school board member from Santa Barbara who spoke at one of our listening sessions. She ran for the school board wanting to call attention to the need for the district to do something on climate. Nobody would listen. She got elected to the school board, and she was the one in meetings who would say, why aren't we doing electric buses? Why aren't we putting solar panels on this new school building? Nobody would listen. And then there was a drought, and then there were mudslides, and there was loss of life, and then the school district mobilized around a plan to get to net zero and to think about resilience across their campuses. And what was scary to me about that is we don't want that to be our collective situation, that we don't act until there's already grievous harm. On a more hopeful note, we heard a lot of examples of great things that are happening around the country. A teacher from Oklahoma who was nervous about teaching about climate change, worried that it might be too partisan. So she started with an issue that all of her students and their families could appreciate. What's our relationship to the land? And how do we, whether it's hiking or hunting or fishing, what is our relationship to the land and what will climate change do to our land? We heard from a leader in Stockton, California who was working to move the entire school bus fleet to electric and had worked with the school board and built public will around that. And we also had the opportunity when we were launching the action plan to visit a net zero school in Arlington, Virginia, Fleet Elementary. And during that visit, one of the interesting things, Randy Weingarten, who leads the AFT, one of the major national teachers unions, she asked folks, how much more did this building cost than a regular fossil fuel dependent school? And the answer was, it didn't. It cost the same. And that was a really powerful moment for us because it said we should have a lot more urgency as a country. Why are we building any school or any public building for that matter that isn't net zero today?
So say a little bit about the recommendations of the commission.
Yeah, so we organized the recommendations first to say there's a set of infrastructure activities that you could engage in. Moving buildings to solar, moving your bus fleet to electric, composting, thinking differently about how the food system and how you provide meals. We talked about education. There's science education around climate change, but also in social studies, we should be talking about climate refugees, right? And the social implications, that's right, of climate change. There's preparing young people for jobs in green industry, renewable energy, resilience. And then there's the potential for schools to be real resilience hubs. I think about Puerto Rico, where my mother was born, where my family comes from. There's been a tremendous harm as a result of climate change. But in many cases, schools have been the place where there was renewable energy, where folks could charge a phone, get on the internet, get food, maybe have shelter. So schools have this tremendous potential as community resilience hubs.
Yeah, it's really a 360 look at the whole sector and the school bus, the curriculum, the food, as you said, a beautiful body of work. So how does the part around racial justice, environmental justice connect into this commission's review?
Yeah. You know, we have to start every conversation grounded in issues of racial justice. And I know there are people who want to wish that away, want to pretend that history didn't happen. Dan, you know, when I lived in Maryland, I lived about 25 miles from where my great-grandfather was enslaved. Right? That's real, that happened. We can't erase that. And there's a legacy. One example of the legacy of institutional racism is in the city of Baltimore, which we both care a lot about. That's a city where 20% of children have asthma. That's more than double the national rate, which is about 9%. Right? That's a result of air pollution tied to fossil fuels and to the location of an incinerator in the city. So if we want to tackle racial justice, we got to prioritize those communities that have been most negatively impacted. Baltimore should be the first place where the public transit fleet is converted to electric, right? We also have 2 million acres of land around our schools, a lot of asphalt, especially in our cities where communities are vulnerable to heat islands. We could be converting those asphalt properties to green spaces for kids and for communities. And we should prioritize the places that have been most frequently harmed, which are often communities of color.
You know, one of the things that we, the Institute, have been invited to consider is the possibility of hosting a summit like this one in Louisville, Kentucky, where the outgoing mayor, Greg Fisher, has organized the same kind of 360 group of business leaders, philanthropists, educators, and health leaders. And what they're doing in Louisville that's worth mentioning is they're doing a gigantic project to plant 8,000 trees all over the city, but especially in the parts of the city where the underserved live, where people who are black and brown have lived for generations. What they're doing with the NIH funding it is studying the health impacts of having more shade. In terms of reducing pollution, dealing with asthma, dealing with heart disease, and they're documenting this. And what you just said about greening schools is going to end up being validated by the work they're doing there.
It's awesome.
It's fun. It's actually quite fun to see all the innovations that are happening at the local level, which of course you've been able to do as a local leader, but then also as a national leader in this space. Well, one of the things that's happening next, we hope, is that there will be a commission on not on K through 12 now, but on higher education. And what can our community colleges and our four-year colleges do to join? Of course, they are in many ways, but to really join the climate movement. And what do you think will happen from the Aspen Higher Education Commission?
Yeah, there's a tremendous opportunity. So, you know, this is Planet Ed, which is the sort of evolution of the K-12 climate action effort. Now includes early childhood task force, a children's media task force, and we are launching this higher ed task force that'll be co-chaired by Kim Hunter-Reid, who's the Commissioner of Higher Education in Louisiana, and Millie Garcia, who leads the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. Higher ed institutions can have a huge impact here. Its facilities, right? At SUNY, we have 40% of the state's public buildings, right? It's green jobs readiness, right? Preparing folks for wind, for solar, and it's research. We're doing at SUNY Binghamton nation-leading research on battery technology that's essential to helping us get to net zero.
So that's a nice transition to your current job, which you've been in for 6 or 7 weeks, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So the SUNY system is, I think, with California, is the biggest public higher education systems in the country. 64 campuses?
That's right.
You just started your role as chancellor. How do you get your arms around something so big and so important to the state of New York and the country?
Yeah. Well, look, we have a great opportunity at SUNY because we've got grad schools, four-year institutions, and all of our community colleges in the state. So we can have an impact on multiple levels. I've made clear that climate action is a priority for me as chancellor, and we are in the process of appointing an executive director of climate action to work across our campuses to support climate action. We've got to move faster to get to net zero. We will hit our target of a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. But we want to get to an 85% reduction at least by 2050. To do that, we've got to accelerate our work in buildings. We are critical to the state's ability to hit our renewable energy targets. We've got to train the workforce at our community college campuses in particular. And then we've got to expand our research work. So at Stony Brook, they're doing tremendous research on resilience. And what do we do about shorefront communities and the impact that climate change will have on them? How do we think about making transportation more resilient in New York City, for example? We've got folks at Albany doing incredible work on atmospheric science, thinking about changing patterns of precipitation and drought across the country. We've got an environmental science and forestry school in Syracuse where they're doing great work on sustainable agriculture. So I think higher ed has a responsibility to help society grapple with our biggest challenges, and this is our biggest existential threat.
Yeah. So how do you as chancellor help all those different campuses in their research agenda? Is it largely to stay out of the way? Is it to give them some guidance? What does it mean to support so much research?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is about facilitation. I want to make sure we get as many federal dollars as possible. So that Inflation Reduction Act, we want a lot of those resources to come to New York to support research. So we're helping folks with thinking through grant applications. We want our institutions to partner with communities to tackle environmental justice issues. It's another place where there's federal funding that we can go get. There's private philanthropy and trying to persuade philanthropists to invest in our campuses to support that research. There's helping our campuses recruit diverse faculty members to engage in that research. There's funding undergrads to do research that hopefully will lead them to choose careers in climate science. So we're thinking a lot at the system level, how do we support this? And then how do we connect our institutions so that we might have one institution that's doing the sort of cutting edge research, partnering with another institution that is training the workforce we need for that industry.
So all across the country, people are asking about questioning the value of higher education. It comes at us from all different angles and perspectives. And it always worries me when it comes from the mouth of younger people, when they say, well, why should I do that? Why should I think about college? Not that college should be for everybody or there's one model, but how are you thinking about that question of the public's interest in and perhaps doubts about the value proposition?
Yeah. Well, look, part of it is helping folks see the economic opportunity that lies on the other side. It's still true that on average, a college graduate is going to make $1 million more over the course of their lifetime. So there's a very instrumental case that's about how do I get a good job that will provide a family-sustaining wage and benefits. But then there's a broader societal case about citizenship and how do we prepare a next generation of citizens to navigate issues like climate change, to bring us closer to the promise of a just society. And then there's a much more deeply personal, how do I lead the good life, right? This is the ultimate Aspen question, right? And I was just at SUNY Fredonia day before yesterday, and I was talking to students who are majoring in engineering or physics, but they are also cello players and in the theater program. And they are finding a way to blend their passions and pursue their passions. And hopefully higher ed is that gift as well.
Yeah. So we mentioned in the K through 12 commission that you and Governor Whitman were the co-chairs, a Republican and a Democrat. In some ways, it's just as interesting that Randy Weingarten was on it because there's probably any number of issues over the years where Randy Weingarten has said, John King, you got this wrong. So how do you create the space for people who are coming at issues from different perspectives in some ways to find the common ground, to do something together?
Yeah. Well, look, John Lewis had this saying. He would say, we came here on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. And it's true, right? The consequences of climate change will be felt by all of us, all of our communities. And so I think there is tremendous opportunity here for bipartisan collaboration, for labor management collaboration, for cross-sector collaboration, educators sitting next to folks who do renewable energy work, sitting next to folks who do transportation. Yeah. And the truth is, if we don't do that kind of collaborative approach, we won't make the progress we need to.
So you're extraordinary at your ability to sit around a table and listen and engage and allow others to feel heard, whatever the starting point. Often it's generational as we get older. So what do you do yourself to put your sensibility in the right place to engage with someone who may be skeptical about even engaging with you?
It's sort of what you try to do as a teacher, right? Which is you try to listen to people's authentic needs and find the place where they're, able to share their perspective. One has to be disciplined about that. I'll tell you one quick story. So when I was Secretary of Education, we did a lot of work on mentoring of particularly boys and young men of color. That was a priority project. We had this My Brother's Keeper initiative. And we had a meeting, the president and a few cabinet members with some young men who were participating in a White House mentoring program. And one of the young men asked President Obama, what are the keys to success in life? And he said two things, which I always remember. It was a very powerful conversation, just a few of us at lunch. And the president said, well, one is I learned in college I was never going to let anybody outwork me. I may not be the most talented person walking in the room, but I'm not going to lose out to someone else because they worked harder than I did. And the second thing he said was having the ability to see the world from somebody else's perspective. And he talked about both having lived a multiracial, multicultural life in different places, and how that helped him to see the world from other perspectives. Seeing the world from the perspectives of his, white Midwestern grandparents, right? But then he also talked about literature. And I think about this a lot in conjunction with the work that Aspen does. He talked about how when you read a novel or you read autobiography, you get to inhabit someone else's worldview. You get to see the world through somebody else's eyes. That ability to do perspective taking, that empathy, he described as making him a better leader and ultimately a better person. And, I try very much to say how to make myself think about how would it feel to be in the other person's situation. And I think if we could all do that a little bit more, we'd have a healthier society.
Yeah. That's a great note to conclude on. Thank you so much, John. Thank you.
Stuckey Kirk, Senior Vice President and Chief Corporate Social Responsibility Officer of Verizon, with the 43rd Mayor of the City of Miami, the Honorable Francis X. Suarez.
Well, hello everyone, how are you? I am so excited to be here to have this conversation with the mayor, particularly in a city like Miami, where there's so much work that is underway to impact this issue of climate resilience. And when I think about an announcement that Verizon made yesterday, we announced our second Verizon Climate Resilience Prize, designed to give about $500,000 to 4 entities that are really focused on using technology that is scalable to address issues of climate in very vulnerable communities, communities that are underinvested in. And so I think, given the conversation that you just heard, it's a great leaping off point, Mayor, for the very first question that I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
How do you, as the mayor of this city, think about the opportunities for climate resilience for really under-resourced communities? What's the work that you're doing, and what's the opportunity that you think we need to continue to do?
Well, I think obviously under-resourced communities struggle inordinately to deal with the impacts of climate change. I mean, that's obvious. And so we did something that I don't think any city in America has done, which is we created a climate anti-gentrification fund. We did that through our Miami Forever bond. It's $4 million, and it's for single-family residential neighborhoods in vulnerable areas, both vulnerable to climate and also under-resourced, and who would not otherwise be able to make their homes more resilient and therefore would have to sell. And so what we do is we grant them the money to do things like put impact windows or change their roof or do things that make the home more resilient, and it's a forgivable loan. They just have to keep the home for a certain period of time. We don't want them to be improving their house and then turning around and flipping it, right, and making money off of it. The idea is so that people don't have to sell, so that people don't have to move out of vulnerable areas and can just make their homes more resilient. And it's something we're very proud of. I think it's first of its kind in the country.
I love what you're doing, and I love this view of doing it through the lens of anti-gentrification. Do you think that $4 million is enough? Do you have insight that says there's more to be done and how to drive that?
You know, it's okay.
Oh.
The answer is I don't know yet.
Okay.
Probably not.
Yep.
But you know, we innovated. We did something that had never been done before. We funded it, and then the idea was we've got to see how it goes in terms of the utilization. You'd be surprised. This is something that's going to maybe shock the audience, which is maybe why they were clapping. But we've set up even things as crazy as like rental stabilization funds that have been untapped, right, sometimes. And I think there's a variety of reasons why that happens. Sometimes it's we're not doing a good enough job getting it out there. Sometimes our standards are not sufficient to meet the need. So that happens, but you know, again, you may or may not be shocked to know sometimes government is not that efficient at spending money. But you know, I think this particular program has been utilized, and it may need to be expanded and grown based on the need.
I love the fact that you recognize the need, that you're doing something about it, and you recognize that you have to do the learning.
And it's innovative.
And it's innovative. So let's talk about the space of innovation with some of the work that you have done sort of inside of Miami. Can you share more broadly some of your work?
Well, we don't have the luxury, and I talked about this in my concluding remarks yesterday, of pretending like climate doesn't impact us. Right? You can't stick your head in the sand and pretend that things are not happening. When we see Irma have 4 to 6 foot storm surge, when we see Ian 10 to 15 foot, and Dorian 20 to 25 foot for 2 days on the Bahamas, we know that Mother Nature has a variety of different levels of destruction within her capability. So we have to be conscientious of that. We have passed a bond, which is something that and by the way, voter approved. It's not something that normally happens in Miami. We don't like to tax ourselves. So you know, we approved a bond to tax ourselves to the tune of $400 million to do a variety of things. Part of the money, by the way, for the Climate and Gentrification Fund comes out of that funding source. And so that's one thing. And certainly on the adaptation front, on the mitigation side, we joined C40, which is you know, a conglomeration of over 1,000 cities in the world that have pledged carbon neutrality. And I think there's two things that we lean into. One of them is we understand that, and they're byproducts of each other, right? We have this saying in Miami, not only do we want Miami to be here forever, right? And that's part of our brand. But we like to say that the environment is the economy. You know, they're not, you know, unfortunately in politics, there are oftentimes juxtapositions, right? Like, oh, either you're pro-COVID policies or you're pro-environment. You know, you got to be one or the other. And we just think a lot of these times, a lot of things are false choices or false narratives. I think, you know, we're 8th in the nation in green jobs. So we have a robust economy when it comes to climate, and that's something that we're happy about. They're good, high-paying jobs that also produce benefits for a world that we all want to see, hopefully we all want to see, preserved, and we all feel that we should be custodians of that world, right? It's like being a custodian of your home. And I have children. I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I want my children to be able to enjoy our environment in the way that I've been able to enjoy it. We have a jewel in the Everglades. We have our Biscayne Bay. So we've done a variety of things to enhance and protect our bay, to make sure that we have drinkable water. One of the things we want to do, a challenge to move forward on, is the fact that we have still a significant amount of homes that are not on our sewer system, that they're on the septic system. And we want to work with Miami-Dade County and the federal government to try to transition from that. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm not sitting here telling you that we've done it all. But there's a lot of good news too. And one of them is that FEMA has determined that the city is less risky in terms of flooding. So I think, and the reason why I say that is to basically say, look, that our investments are targeted and they're being recognized as reducing risk. And I think that's an objective indication of what we're doing is working.
Okay. So thank you for that very sort of ecosystem view of all that you're doing. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that, and then I'm going to segue a little bit into partnerships. So if you think through sort of all that you said, particularly this view that the environment is the economy, how are you thinking about the under-resourced communities that you're lifting into opportunity to participate in that economy, to have jobs, to contribute more broadly, to get the skills and the training that's needed so that they can help find and create solutions that they can bring back to their own communities?
You know, we are resourcing science, technology, and math education. We're doing it at every level, from kindergartners all the way through 11 through 18-year-olds by investing in high-performing nonprofits. And then we created a scholarship fund, which we call the Venture Miami Scholarship Fund, so that every single Miamian that's a Pell Grant recipient, basically the most needy in our community, if they are getting a STEM degree, which hopefully will translate into potentially some environmental engineering degree, as well as computer engineering, et cetera, they go to school for free. So we did that by putting a modest investment from the city side, but leveraging it with an 11-to-1 investment from the private sector side. So we're investing about $500,000. The private sector is investing $5.5 million. And we've created the scholarship fund so that kids in STEM education fields who are Pell Grant recipients can go to college and get a university degree for free.
Excellent. So,
we're also doing it for First and Family, which I think is also, not necessarily related to climate per se, but it's something I'm really proud of, so that if you're a Pell Grant recipient in the city of Miami and you're first in your family to go to college, we pick up the balance.
I personally think that's so important. I do not live in Miami. I actually live in Texas, but I graduated from college.
Nobody's perfect.
Though we are close.
You're close.
But I graduated from college because I took advantage of Pell Grants.
There you go.
And so I have a huge sense of what that means and how we can move people into economic prosperity by really helping them to fund, their education. So you talked about the role that partners are playing in the work that you're doing. I think a lot about that at Verizon with, our technology, our 5G, what we can do inside of education. Talk more about your expectations of how companies like Verizon and our technology helps to participate in the climate economy.
Well, we know that the world is changing rapidly, that the rate of disruption is increasing and exponential. And we know that the world is also metamorphosizing from a highly industrial economy to an increasingly digital economy. And so we think that companies like Verizon and 5G and democratizing 5G, and even the infrastructure bill, which one of the components of it is broadband for all. It's important to give everyone in our community an opportunity to be successful. If they have that opportunity and they want to go into a field like climate technology, which, by the way, for young people is their #1 issue. It may not have been the number one issue for my generation or even the one that came after me, but the one that comes after that, that's 18 years old, I don't know what they're called, if they're called the TikTok generation. I don't know if they've gotten a name yet, but that generation it's their number one issue. And I can tell you, I hear about it. So it's definitely in the forefront of their mind. So I can see how a lot of these partnerships, this digital access, can increase the ability for them to have an opportunity to get a STEM degree in a climate field and be part of the answer. I think in life, we strive for meaning. And I think that's what we want to live our life for, is to give back, to participate, to provide. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. And I'm happy that Verizon is a partner in that initiative.
Yeah, thank you for that. So one final question. If you think about your legacy, not just as a mayor, but in this space of climate resilience, tell me 3 things that would be important to you to cement that legacy.
I think the 3 things are adaptability, mitigation, and then the third one is one that doesn't get talked about, which is reversal. Right? I love to see a world where we adapt to what Mother Nature does. I'd love to see a world where we mitigate, and more than mitigate, but we eliminate the emission of carbon into the environment, right? And then I like to see a world where we can reverse the damage that we've done. And we never talk about that. I mean, I don't know why we don't talk about it, because I guess we're so focused on mitigating to a place where there isn't some catastrophic outcome that we just don't even get to the next step, which is how do we reverse? I have a really deep sense of belief in the human spirit and the spirit of ingenuity. You know, people will often tell me, you know, is Miami going to be underwater? And I say, well, there's a lot of cities in the world that are under the sea level, right? So they've found ways to survive for hundreds of years under sea level. So if the worst case scenario presents itself that we're actually below sea level, I still feel optimistic that we can solve for that problem. But we shouldn't necessarily have to get there to solve for these macro problems. We should feel a sense of urgency. We should feel a sense of pride in our world. And frankly, you know, we should find the economic means to do it. I think, like I said, I think there are economic incentives in play, and not just government incentives, but private sector economic incentives in play. You know, I know that there's a debate about this, but I've been to many Middle Eastern countries who are oil-producing countries whose main focus right now is finding next generation energy sources, right, and being the purveyor of those energy sources. So, you know, some people doubt their sincerity in that, but I can tell you it's consistent. I mean, they're consistently talking about it, they're consistently investing in it, which leads me to believe that even they understand that the world is going to transition and that they want to be a part of that transition. You know, if they're purveyors of energy, they want to be purveyors of the next iteration of technology and energy. And that's actually smart. That's good business. I mean, if you see something being disrupted in your industry, adapt. I mean, we saw our main power company here, which was producing mostly nuclear power, become the largest purveyor of solar in the country. So they did that most likely because they saw the competitive pressures and they realized that it was smart, sort of you can't beat them, join them kind of mentality. And not only did they join them, they became the largest purveyor of solar in the country. So that happens, and we have to lean into that and applaud that when it does, when economics drives innovation in a way that's good for our environment and for our country.
Yeah, thank you. So reversal is important. And I think that I would just close our conversation by saying the ability to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, to ensure that they understand how to make changes inside of their community is so important, particularly for under-resourced and vulnerable communities. So I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you for the partnership that we have and the fact that Verizon is as committed to climate issues as you are in the city of Miami. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rose.
That concludes our morning program in the Performance Hall. Please make sure to use the hashtag AspenIdeasClimate as you post on social media.